Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is June the 19th, 2024. It has been 3,796 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 120 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, and 2 years and 117 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression. Our writing team had the day off yesterday. Today's podcast looks at events that happened on Tuesday and Wednesday morning. During the podcast, you will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. A link is in the podcast description. There are minor map updates today. The Russia-Ukraine War Report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, our in-house team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian mill bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. 1. We maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction and stability paradox. 2. Russia is setting conditions to commit further acts of aggression in Europe. 3. Russia's sustained attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, which has destroyed 80% of its combined thermal and power plant capacity, is a continuation of Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022, as outlined in 2 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court on March 5th. 4. The quantity of artillery ammunition available to Ukrainian frontline units is reaching a level where the stabilization of existing defensive lines is improving across Ukraine. This is the last day for this entry. 5. Russia's trampling of international humanitarian law has been accelerating since March the 22nd. We maintain that the willful ignoring of blatant Russian war crimes by international watchdogs is encouraging escalation. 6. Autocrat Putin is continuing the largest purge of the Russian Ministry of Defense, led by the FSB, since Joseph Stalin's 1936 to 1938 purge. 7. The attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have incrementally increased the chance of an intentional nuclear accident at multiple nuclear facilities in Ukraine. On Monday night, Ukrainian air defenses intercepted all 10 Russian Shahed-136 one-way drones, with most launched in the Odessa direction. Yesterday, Russia launched another 21 Shahed-136 one-way drones, with 19 intercepted. Operational Command South reported that a Kh-31P anti-radiation missile was fired at the Odessa region, and an Iskander-M short-range ballistic missile armed with cluster munitions hit the Mykolaiv Oblast. There was no other information on the missile strike. In the Lviv Oblast, 5 Shaheds were shot down, with at least one intact warhead hitting the State Scientific Research Control Institute of Veterinary Medicines and Feed Additives, destroying an 800-square-meter administrative building. In the village of Malekhiv, falling debris wounded 2 civilians, including a 70-year-old security guard who is in hospital. A multi-story residential building was damaged, with many windows blown out. A Russian airstrike on the village of Slatine in the Kharkiv Oblast wounded 1 civilian. Russia also shelled the settlement of Kurilivka, wounding a man who is in hospital. In the Donetsk Oblast, Russian shelling killed 1 civilian in the village of Zvanivka, located near Siversk. The village of Zarichne was also shelled, wounding a 58-year-old man and damaging his home. Kurakhivka was shelled, killing a 70-year-old man and wounding an unspecified number of civilians. In Konstantinivka, explosive ordnance disposal engineers neutralized a Russian Fab-250 UMPK glide bomb that failed to explode. 2 Russian first-person view one-way drones struck the village of Dmitrivka in the Mykolaiv Oblast, wounding a 69-year-old woman. In the Kherson Oblast, Russia shelled and bombed 17 villages and settlements and the cities of Berislav and Kherson. 2 civilians were injured. In the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, Nikopol and the surrounding settlements were attacked by Russian Grad rockets and artillery. A man was injured and he is in hospital. Debris from a Shahed 136 one-way drone injured a 74-year-old man near the city of Dnipro. He went to the hospital, was treated and released. Here is today's action report. Russia carried out 136 assaults on Monday and at least 113 through Tuesday evening. Through June the 15th, the 7-day moving average increased to 117. Russia launched 2 more localized but significant offensives, one in the direction of Borova in the Kharkiv Oblast and the other in the area of New York. Despite the increase in activity, there were limited changes to territorial control. Now for the assessment of the day from our analyst team. On Monday, autocrat Vladimir Putin dismissed the 4 remaining deputy ministers of defense who were under former minister Sergei Shoigu. Pavel Popov and Tatyana Shevtsova have been criminally charged for accepting bribes and corruption, so their dismissal was a formality. Nikolai Pankov was the State Secretary and Deputy Minister of Defense, holding the position since 2005. Ruslan Salikov was the first Deputy Minister of Defense since 2015. Anna Tsivilova, the daughter of Putin's late cousin, was appointed the Deputy Defense Minister for Social and Housing Support for Military Personnel. She holds degrees in Management and Medicine. Her husband, Sergei Tsivilov, is the Minister of Energy. Tsivilova held 70% of Kolmar Group LLC, an energy company based in Switzerland. Due to Russia's war of aggression, she was added to US, EU and G7 sanctions lists in 2022. She has no military, veteran affairs or public service experience. She replaces Timur Ivanov, who was arrested on April 24th for bribery less than 3 weeks before Shoigu was dismissed as Minister of Defense. In our assessment, Putin is creating the Ministry of Defense in his own image, replacing military leaders with decades of experience with civilian loyalists and family members. The Russian military was already corrupt and dysfunctional. As Putin narrows his circle further, the echo chamber he resides in will only get louder. The impact on Ukraine is likely positive, given the culture within the Russian military. Putin's loyalists will carry out their own purge down the ranks of the organization, creating gridlock. In the short term, these changes likely won't change the situation on the battlefield. Valery Gerasimov remains the chief of the General Staff and the commander of all Russian forces in Ukraine, and Putin is still inserting himself in decision-making down to the battalion level. Now, let's talk about what happened on the battlefield. Ready? Here we go. Starting in the Kharkiv Oblast, we begin in the Lipty-Vovchansk area of operation, or EO. Fighting continued in Vovchansk with no significant change in the situation. Russian troops are still surrounded at the machine aggregate plant, which was bombed by the Ukrainian Air Force and was attacked with artillery, rocket-propelled grenades and anti-tank guided missiles. Ukrainian sources reported that about half of the surrounded Russian troops are no longer able to fight, with several small groups reaching the Russian main lines to the north and a few surrenders. Up to 40 Russian troops have slipped into the plant over the last few days. Russian forces tried 4 times to break through to the factory, and the VKS, that's the Russian Aerospace Forces, dropped 13 bombs on the settlement. A Ukrainian drone destroyed a Russian UR-77 Meteor mine clearer. Elements of the Russian 155th and 810th Naval Infantry Brigade have been rotated into Belgorod as reinforcements. The 810th has been combat destroyed at least 3 times since April 2022 and is no longer an elite unit. Ukrainian forces continue to make slow progress in Hlyboke, where house-to-house fighting continues. Ukrainian forces are also on the offensive in Lukyantsy, and have started pushing Russian troops out of the village. In the Kupiansk AO, Russian forces carried out 13 attacks in the direction of Sinkivka, suffered losses, and returned to their defensive positions. Significant fighting continued near Stepova Novoselivka and in the direction of Pishchane from Krokhmalne. In the Svatove AO of the Kharkiv and Luhansk oblasts, Russian forces continued their attacks on the northern and eastern outskirts of Berestove and in the direction of Hrekivka from occupied Novovodane. Russia attempted to advance from Kuzemivka in the direction of Novoselivske and lost 3 main battle tanks, including a T-90A and a T-72B3. The Ukrainian 3rd Assault Brigade reported that Russia has amassed 10,000 troops with the 3rd and 144th Divisions of the 20th Combined Arms Army in the area of Raihorodka and had started an offensive in the direction of Borova. This is a similar-sized force to the one that attempted to reach Borova in the late summer and early fall of 2023. They were able to advance into a couple of small hamlets west of the Zherebets River, but couldn't overcome the difficult terrain on the Kharkiv-Luhansk Oblast border. In the Kremenaya of the Luhansk Oblast, Russia sustained their attacks in the direction of Makiyivka and Terny, and in the Serebryanka woods. There was no change in territorial control. Let's talk about the Donbass and the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. The Siversk AO was very active, with Russian forces carrying out at least 13 assaults. Russian forces carried out 8 attacks toward Verkhnyokamyansk from Zolotarivka, suffered losses and retreated to their defensive positions. Attacks on Spirne, Vyimka and Rozdolivka were repulsed. In the Kostantinivka AO, there were no changes to the line of conflict. Fighting continued between Bogdanivka and Grigorivka, and significant fighting was ongoing on the eastern edges of the canal district of Chasiv Yar. Russian attempts to advance toward the Novy microdistrict were unsuccessful. Fighting also restarted on the western edge of Ivanivske. Russian troops tried to advance in the direction of Klishchiivka twice, suffered losses and retreated to their defensive positions. Near Stupochki, a Ukrainian first-person view one-way drone was used to intercept a Russian Lancet UAV. Ukrainian drone operators are becoming increasingly proficient at intercepting Lancets and Orlan drones by crashing into them. We link to 2 videos showing the Lancet and an Orlan 10 drone being destroyed. There's more information in the podcast description on how to access our almost daily situation report. In the Toretsk-New York AO, Russian forces carried out 9 attacks in the direction of New York, Pivnichne and Druzhba. The situation east of Druzhba was especially difficult, and fighting was ongoing. In our assessment, the activity goes beyond probing Ukrainian defenses, but may be a secondary attack to try and pull resources from other areas of operation. In the southwestern part of the Donetsk Oblast, the heaviest fighting continues to be in the Avdiivka AO, where Russian forces carried out at least 37 assaults. Russian attempts to advance in the direction of Oleksandropol and Kalinove were unsuccessful. Fighting continued in the western part of Novo-Oleksandrivka, east of Yevgenivka, the eastern edge of Sokil, the western edge of Novopokrovsk, and in the direction of Novoselivka-Persha. The Ukrainian defense has been highly effective, limiting Russian gains over the last 7 days. 2 geolocated videos showed that Russian forces had advanced to the first buildings on the eastern edge of Yasnobrodivka, but it did not appear they were able to consolidate their positions. The line of conflict and grey area were adjusted. For the second time in a week, Russian mercenary Melblogovo Gonzo walked back their claims of a successful Russian wet crossing into Karlivka. Finally, there was positional fighting in the areas of Nevelske. The heaviest fighting in the Vuhledar AO was in Krasnogorivka, where the situation was unchanged. Geolocated videos showed that a Russian advance between Georgiivka and Pobeda failed, with several armored vehicles destroyed. Based on the location of the fighting, the line of conflict between the N15 and T510 highways was moved west. East of Georgiivka, a Russian semi-total tank, you'll need to watch the video, with mine rollers was destroyed by an FPV one-way drone. Wogonzo also walked back their claims of Russian forces reaching Kostiantynivka and admitted fighting continued in Paraskoviivka. The intensity of Russian attacks in the Vremivka AO has declined. Assaults on Urozhaine were repulsed, and an attempt to advance in the direction of Novodarivka from Priyutne was unsuccessful. A Ukrainian drone destroyed a Russian TOS-1 multiple-launch rocket system near occupied Staromlynivka. Dmytro Pletenchuk, a spokesperson for the Ukrainian Navy, reported that Russia had made repairs to the ferry terminal in occupied Purge, and some operations had restarted. Satellite images confirmed that two Project 22-800 Karakurt-class corvettes that were assigned to the Black Sea have been repositioned to the Caspian Sea. See, going home works. Now, if the rest of the Russian military followed their Black Sea fleet, we'd be much closer to a just peace. At Port Azov in the Rostov region of Russia, several Ukrainian one-way drones struck an oil depot, destroying two storage tanks. The facility has burned for more than 24 hours, with the fire covering 3,200 square meters.
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War Podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers, and analysts is funded by readers, listeners, and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/malcontentnews.
Here is my theater-wide update. Since Sunday, 3 countries have withdrawn their signatures from the Peace Summit communiqué, while the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople became a new signatory. Iraq and Jordan withdrew their signatures on June the 16th, with Rwanda retracting its approval yesterday. None of the countries explained why they withdrew from the declaration. In Kyiv, Kazakh journalist Aidos Sadykov survived an assassination attempt, being shot while sitting in a parked car with his wife. He is in serious condition after surgery. His wife Natalia was uninjured. Sadykov received political asylum in Ukraine in 2022 and was placed on the wanted list by Kazakh officials in 2023 for inciting hatred. Ukraine signed a contract with the Franco-German defense company KNDS to purchase 54 RCH-155 self-propelled howitzers. A delivery date has not been announced. The RCH-155 can fire 8 rounds per minute and is capable of accurately firing on the fly. It also can provide indirect and direct fire. It only requires a crew of 2 who sit in a separate compartment from the turret and ammunition storage. The War Crimes and Human Rights section sometimes discusses human rights abuses, suffering, torture, and gender-based violence. Today's report contains graphic details of a war crime that some listeners may find disturbing. If you're sensitive to this content, I recommend you skip this section. Ukrainian intelligence reported that a Russian military unit stationed in occupied Volnovakha received orders not to take any prisoners. During an ISR flight by a Ukrainian drone, a wrecked infantry mobility vehicle of the Ukrainian armed forces was observed with the severed head of an executed Ukrainian soldier left on the hood. This is the 3rd documented case of a Ukrainian POW beheaded by Russian forces or their proxies. The Ukrainian prosecutor's office has opened an investigation. In the Kharkiv Oblast in Rodichi, a 7-year-old picked up a Russian PFM-1 anti-personnel mine, which exploded. He is hospitalized in serious condition. While Russia and Ukraine are not signatories of the Ottawa Convention on Landmines, the deployment of anti-personnel mines in civilian areas is forbidden by international humanitarian law and is considered a war crime. Russia shelled a hospital in the city of Kherson with Grad rockets, striking the ambulance bay. 2 emergency vehicles were destroyed, and the force of the blast blew out windows in one of the buildings. No staff or patients were wounded in the attack. Hospitals have protected status under the Geneva Conventions, and the intentional targeting of medical facilities is a violation of international humanitarian law, even if the facility is caring for military personnel. On June the 25th, the European Court will render a verdict in the case of Russia versus Ukraine. The case Ukraine versus Russia is based on 3 complaints that Ukraine filed with the European Court of Human Rights in 2014, 2015 and 2018. Ukraine accused Russia of gross human rights violations in annexed Crimea, including the right to life, prevention of inhuman treatment and torture, the right to freedom and security, a fair trial, freedom of religion, education, and free movement. We haven't talked about the land of Mobix mobilization and Mir, and we never end the podcast with war crimes. Russian autocrat Vladimir Putin traveled to North Korea for the first time in 24 years to hold high-level talks with dictator Kim Jong-un about expanding military support. After Russia exhausted its Cold War stockpile of artillery ammunition, it was forced to turn to North Korea for artillery shells, anti-tank weapons and rockets. An analysis by the IISS concluded that since 2020, Russia has built or modernized 231 to 267 T-90M main battle tanks. That would put the maximum annual production at 67 per year. According to the Oryx database, Russia has lost 72 T-90 tanks per year, with the number accelerating in 2024. While that math may not appear to be in Ukraine's favor, Russia is no longer building T-54, 55, 62, 72 or 80 tanks and is using the hulls from reserve T-72 to refurbish T-90s. Since March 2022, over 10,000 Russian soldiers have been charged with desertion and insubordination, with 8,600 convictions. In April 2024, 35 guilty verdicts were made a day, with over 900 convictions for being absent without leave, insubordination, desertion, and refusing to respond to a mobilization order. I have one more story to end today's podcast on a lighter note. Russia hosted the first annual BRICS Games, its alternative to the Olympics. On state media, it was reported that there have been great victories over the world, with Russia earning more than 229 medals. There's a twist to this tremendous performance that is somewhere between comical and Orwellian. Many of the events only have Russian competitors, and in some cases just a single athlete. Take Alexander Maitsev as an example. He won the gold medal in artistic swimming for Mother Russia and autocrat Putin, artistically swimming by himself. And that's what we know. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.